Hi, this is Vanessa again. I'm the president and principal of Creative Performance, a marketing operations consultancy, and a former agency principal. I've done over 100 integrated software deployments and facilitated over 50 agency turnarounds over the last decade, and really been focused on the data and insights needed to answer those really tough questions for agencies. This is the third part in a 6-part series on preparing your agency for the economic downturn. In the first video, we talked about how 84% of CFOs are predicting a 2020 recession, which is putting a lot of pressure on the CMOs, which is in turn putting pressure on agencies to reduce rates again, or they're actually just moving the work in-house. In fact, actually many of my agencies right now are telling me they're actively seeing their clients moving work in-house and they're losing business. The second video, we focused on organizational agility. We discussed what it is, why it matters, and identified it as one of the last sustainable competitive advantages for agencies. If you haven't watched the first 2 videos, I highly recommend starting there and coming back to this third video. In the third video, we're going to focus on designing a robust financial and operational model for your agency. I know, really exciting. So why is this so important? It's what the CFOs believe is true, it'll be more important than ever for you to understand if your agency's business model is actually viable, or if there are changes that you need to make to even meet your goals. Okay? According to a recent study by Bain, best-in-class organizations grew at 17% compound annual growth rate during the last recession, compared to 0% among other companies. Even more shocking than that is that they continued to grow at 13% after the recession, while their competitors only grew at 1%. This proves that being in a good place operationally and financially going into a recession can even give you another competitive advantage. I want you to be one of the companies growing at 17% during the next recession. While we don't know exactly when that is, it can take some time to get prepared. So we better start now. One key way to do that is by designing your strategic 2020 financial and operational model. So what is a financial and operational model? Good question. According to Investopedia, financial modeling is a representation in numbers of all aspects of a company's operations. Think of it as how things work in your agency by numbers, right? When it's done right, it can be used to estimate an agency's revenue and costs and projected profits. It's used for strategic planning, as a decision-making tool for leadership, and last but not least, to validate your financial and your business model, right? In my experience, most agencies aren't doing a very formal form of financial model, but rather they're doing one of 2 very informal processes. The first one I call the monthly nut model, done usually by smaller agencies, which basically says, we know what our expenses are each month, and we're going to find every way possible to bring in more revenue in that month than our monthly nut and hope for some profit. Okay, so this focus is very cash-based. It's not designed around measuring accruals or whether you're going to be profitable or not. Okay, I highly recommend against it. The second is, I joke, it's the shoot for the stars model, right? Done by smaller and some mid-sized agencies, where we set completely unrealistic revenue goals without understanding what it's going to actually take in people or cost to produce that work. And we pretty much cross our fingers and hope that everything falls into place to get there. So obviously, neither of these 2 models is ideal. So what does that mean? We actually recommend a much more structured and strategic approach to financial and operational modeling. And we call this our Lighthouse Model. Okay? This is a top-down and a bottom-up approach, and it also incorporates a formal rate review to ensure that you have all the right building blocks for a successful model. When it's done right, the financial and operational modeling can validate your business model, or it can identify key areas of weakness that the leadership team needs to address in order to make that business model work. So often I hear agencies tell me that they feel like they keep needing to feed the machine, right? A strategic Lighthouse model will help you identify issues that are fixable via process versus those that are coming from a broken business model, which may require some type of full organizational change in order to fix. Okay? Wouldn't you like to know that your business model could work as long as you execute on it? Versus not knowing if it will work and continuously banging your head against the wall over and over, attempting to solve a business model problem with a process solution. Well, hopefully I've convinced you by now that in 2020, you actually want to build a robust strategic Lighthouse model for your organization. So what is a Lighthouse model? That's a great question. And how do we build one? So the Lighthouse model can be broken down into 3 unique pieces that must fit together. So piece number 1 is the financial inputs and outputs. Okay. Number 2, the labor capacity planning. And number 3, the rate analysis. Okay. So let's just start I want to talk to you in detail about these. Let's talk about what the financial inputs and outputs are, right? For those agencies that do have a financial model, they have a model of some sort, it often revolves around just the financial inputs and outputs, right? So your financial inputs and outputs come from the different types of forecasted revenue, right? So you have fee income, right? Which is my revenue produced by billable hours, billable employees. I have production income. Whether that is marked up or passed through, it's the amount of money that I am making, or it's the revenue that I'm making on marking up outside expenses or passing them through. And then there's media, okay? And that media could either be marked up or passed through as well, okay? So these 3 types of revenue should be forecasted by client for existing business, right? You should be taking into account specific negotiated rate cards as well as negotiated markups on production and media. The remaining revenue inputs will need to come from new business, right? Again, broken down by fee income, production income, media income, using what would be standard rates and markups, okay? So really critical note here, if you need to make sure that you work with your business development teams on this forecast to ensure that these targets can actually be met. It's better to be conservative here. It's easier to add bodies and revenue later, and it's much worse to have bodies with no revenue coming in the door. So just a really important note there. Next comes your financial outputs, right? Which consist of 3 major types. You have your cost of goods sold, okay? These are easy. These should be derived from your projected production and media income less that projected markup, right? This is going to be the net you're going to be paying out to the vendors, okay? Your direct labor and benefits, okay? This should be salaries and benefits for current billable employees and planned future hires and projected freelance costs for that following year. And then third would be overhead expenses, which would include indirect labor and benefits, and all operating expenses not related to delivering work. Your overhead forecast should start from last year's month-over-month accrual-based P&L, right? And it be updated for next year's projected increases, as well as, of course, the salaries and benefits for your current overhead employees and planned future hires. At this point, you've created a great draft financial model, but you have no idea if it's really viable, okay? So most people who do a financial model stop right here. But to have a Lighthouse model, you need to know that you can meet. It's critical to complete the labor capacity planning and the rate analysis steps that we talked about up above. So let's talk about those. So for the capacity planning, start by listing all your current billable employees, freelancers, and forecasted hires by department, okay? Calculate the target billable hours. Of course, normalize that for part-timers or managers, and make sure to calculate the weighted average billable rate and the total billable amount, right? Total targeted hours, weighted average billable amount equals total billable amount per person. Once you complete that, this is going to show you the total agency capacity in dollars, allowing you to see how much you can produce with the resources that you have at those current rates. Most people believe they're done at this point. Okay, and they're like, okay, I'm done. Unfortunately, because most agencies have a large realization gap, which is billable hours that are not billed back to clients due to overages of beyond scope, over-servicing, mis-scoping, all that fun stuff, you must operationally plan to do more work even though you're going to be paid less. So this is the discrepancy between financial models and the operational model and why it's so important to connect them. Your labor capacity must exceed your projected fee income to cover your projected realization gap. Let me give you an example. If my fee income is projected at $10 million and my labor capacity plan is projected at $10 million, but last year my realization gap was almost $3 million, that means in order to meet my new financial model, I must be able to do $13 million in work so that I can actually only bring in $10 million of revenue. I know it's really painful to think that way. And nobody wants to plan this, but it is better to plan reality and then start taking a whack at that realization gap one step at a time, okay? So I need more people and my capacity need plan needs to increase to 13 million. My financial outputs need to include that, right? Which means I need to add additional billable employees to my model to be able to complete that work, okay? Really important. This is where most people get this wrong, okay? In addition to aligning that labor capacity to your financial model, you should also analyze your rates from both a top-down and a bottom-up perspective. This means you need to ensure alignment with the rates in your region, right? There's your top-down. And then you need to ensure that you have a reasonable rate margin, right, on each employee. Okay. Now, note, it's very possible that it's not going to be the same rate margin. You'll have some employees that have a much larger rate margin than other employees. That's normal. But you have to ensure that the average rate margin based on the model that you're building is in alignment with your capacity plan and your financial model. Okay. So this is why we talk about the 3 critical pieces of a lighthouse model, because all of these things impact each other and they have to be dialed up, dialed down, dialed left, dialed right to ensure the alignment and the viability of this lighthouse model. Okay, you need to use a rate analysis to ensure you're charging the right amount of money for what you're paying people. You need to do a labor capacity plan to ensure that you can operationally execute enough work with the people you have to meet the projected fee income. And you need to do an overhead expense check to ensure that your overhead expenses and overhead labor aren't too high to give you the profit that you need. A well-designed lighthouse model will allow you to thrive in the recession versus holding on for dear life and hoping you make it out the other side. So, thanks so much for watching this. I hope I've convinced you that you want to come out of this and start making your lighthouse model. We do have a few more topics coming up. We have the next video we're going to be talking about in this series is going to be project management, where we talk about what successful PMOs look like and how do you prepare your agency for a project management discipline. Agency management software, how do you leverage it and bring all these things we've been talking about together, as well as business intelligence. So once you have all of those things, how do you then leverage the data to align your leadership team to make these big decisions, to answer these tough questions, and then execute? Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again.